Good morning and welcome to Lattes and Leaders with Dr. Brad Johnson. This morning we have with us Mr. Christopher Nesmith. How are you doing today?
Great. How are you doing, Jeremy?
Doing well, doing well.
Good morning. Yeah, glad you're able to make it. What time is it there?
It
Still
is
early morning or
10:30 in the morning, so not super
okay.
early.
So, why don't you get started this morning? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey so far and maybe some of the stuff you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm currently the superintendent of the Elma School District in Elma, Washington, a small rural community of about 1,700 students. And I have the luxury of co-leading with Kim Cantu, the superintendent out of Mansfield, just south of Dallas, the AASA Redefining Ready. So we lead the AASA's work on helping school superintendents from across the United States becoming career, college, and life ready. So about kind of get the opportunity to travel the United States and look at different ways in which we do that work. And kind of just some of the ways that we got here was, as I used to be a computer teacher, coding, graphic design, digital media, and probably the best job in the world if you get a chance to just play with computers all day.
Yeah.
And found my way becoming a district assistant principal, CT director, to running a building, um, and really just got this profound impact on we really need to rethink on what are we doing for our students to have these better life expectancies. What are we doing to help our students have richer, fuller, more meaningful lives? And it was just really lucky to have an ability to go tour the nation of Germany and go look at their TVET system. And then from there, I mean, I literally got back, and 3 weeks later, I had a friend with a registered apprenticeship go, "Hey, we're trying to launch a youth apprenticeship. We have a governor's summit." And I'm like, "Well, I just got back from a nation that does nothing but apprenticeships." So, and sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And we were lucky in Washington State to be able to pilot this manufacturing registered apprenticeship where kids were getting their journey level certifications and partnering with all of our aerospace manufacturers. And then when the state wanted to replicate that model, said, "Hey, we're going to send a team to ETH Zurich in Zurich, Switzerland, and you're going to study with 9 other nations, and you're going to figure out how to redesign your educational system." So we went to ETH Zurich. We're there at the nation of Benin, Costa Rica, South Africa, Nepal, Chile, and you're trying to figure out how like we can build a Washington State youth apprenticeship system. And when the Minister of Education of Nepal stood up and he's like, if we can't solve our nation's problems, through education, by this time next year, I could be exiled or dead. And you're like, oh my God, like that's a very different life problem than what
Wow,
we're
yeah.
experiencing in Washington State. And so you realize but our kids, for a lot of our kids, this is life or death. So we came back and we built a system-wide approach to have a registered apprenticeship, where kids are going to work, getting paid to go to school, earning their academic credit, and getting their journey level certifications while they're paid to go to high school. And did that as a district cabinet member for a few years. And I realized, like, where this isn't happening in rural, high poverty communities. So I grew up in Grace Harbor County in Washington State. We're just outside of, like, just right near the coast. I'm about 20 miles away from the coast, right near the Olympic National Park, or south of the Olympic National Park, with right near the rainforests. So it's kind of, I mean, it's still cloudy and wet out right now, and I mean, at the peak of summer. And I felt like this is a community where I grew up. I grew up in Grace Harbor, where our kids could really use these new optimistic life outcomes. Our students need hope, and these are not areas where it existed. So that's kind of what we did. So we moved out to Elma, and we run. I think I sent you a video. We run a full registered apprenticeship in the logging and lumber industries, fixing those equipment, and that's kind of what we've been doing. It's we're working in rural, high poverty communities and areas with generational hopelessness and returning hope to the lives of our kids. Sorry, that's kind of a long.
Oh, that's
No, I
great.
love it. Yeah, and I'm glad that you explained that, and I love that, and I love that concept because I always am a proponent of the traditional, the CTE and the vocational tracks and programs, because I really do think we do a disservice to a large portion of our students by not providing them those opportunities to and you're taking it a step further with the apprenticeship. So they're actually getting paid while they're actually learning and going to school. So, you talk about like motivating students to learn or to go to school. What greater motivation is there than that, to leave, have a job, be certified, and have a career path ready for you? That's to me, that would be a big motivator. So I love that, and I hope that's something that we can see spread throughout the U.S. because every state, just talking about rural areas there, I can't think of a state I've been to where there's not large rural areas. Even in New York, people think that the whole state is the city, but once you move out of the city into the north part, it's rural. There's rural areas, so it's something that is definitely can be impactful to really anywhere in the U.S.
No, I'm 100%. Actually, we were just actually our AASA group, Redefining Ready. We were just up in Coxsackie, New York, just south of Albany,
Okay.
and it's about a district of about 1,500 students. And we got to kind of go see this, and that's really where I love this AASA work is we can build this registered apprenticeship in our small rural district, but then having the ability to work with superintendents from across the United States on how they solve this problem. So, yeah, we were just in New York in April.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love the whole concept. I'm so glad you're able to share that with us.
So I'm interested to hear a little bit about how your technology background influences your leadership and maybe some of the stuff that you've integrated in your school.
I mean, honestly, in a small rural district, I think the most surface level is when I showed up, it was like, what's going on with our logo? What's going on with our website and how we're conveying information? So I think there was like some basis of, just like really kind of working through the way in which we're communicating. I used to work in pro audio. I used to work when I was a program director of a radio station before I got into education. So I used to have to do all the kind of the media management. So actually, audio was my background, and now I started getting when I was a teacher, I got into the visual arts. So there's not a whole lot of like audio expertise careers for teachers. That's kind of the most surface level. But then the really where it got advanced is we were actually I was a 2013 Microsoft Imagine Academy teacher of Washington State because we had the highest rate of Microsoft certification, and that's really what kind of got sprungboard that. When I was a CT director, we started Python certifying every eighth grader, and Microsoft certifying every seventh grader in the district I was
Wow.
previously in. And we were doing quite well at that. Actually, one of our teachers, Davina Khan, was Gizmodo magazine. I think that's right. Our like teacher of the year and STEM teacher of the year and international equity teacher of the year for how many girls we were having Python certified throughout our district. So just having that kind of familiarity of code and writing code as an administrator and now as a superintendent and kind of being intimately involved with trying to build those programs, has, I think really kind of encourages your teachers. Some of it is in our learning management system, I think, where the background in technology helps because we're a mastery based learning district, meaning in Washington State, they changed the laws on how you don't have to, it's not built around Carnegie units now in Washington State law. It's built around if students can meet standards, students earn credit. But the problem we have is we don't really have infrastructure across our state on how you can show a student met standard in order to award that credit. So, like this year, we're actually launching a new mastery based learning initiative district wide. And I think the background in technology has been helpful because it's looking for learning management systems and understanding the database design on those learning management systems. Because most learning management systems, it's like, here's the class and then here's the standards. And we have a new learning management system called Empower. It's part of Marzano's Competence Center for Competency-Based Education, where the database is built where the standards kind of exist freely within the system, and then courses can pull those standards. So you could have a social studies class, and you can pull English standards in, and then that student's English grade is built around the collective of English standards they've met, regardless of where they've met them. And I think
Mm.
but I think it's really, I think one of the limiting factors we have with school district leaders is understanding how the database design and how databases are structured and the relationship between the data tables on how you can actually, here's the student, here's the record, and are you adopting software that can do what you need to do as you understand the technology to do it. That's a powerful tool in our registered apprenticeship work because we can actually, our students don't sacrifice going to university when they do an apprenticeship. That's one of your biggest concerns when you're doing trades-based education, because now that we have a database for our student learning management system that's built around students meeting standard, we can organically embed in math, science, English standards into those apprenticeship experiences. So students are still earning a university approved transcript to move on to higher levels of education.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
I love that concept because and it kind of lets you understand that learning is holistic. You know, in one class you can draw in standards from three or four different, areas or content areas. So that's really interesting.
Where else in life do you go, I'm going to do 50 minutes of intensive, ELA skills, and then I'm done. And I'm going to take a 5-minute break, and then I'm going to do 50 minutes of intensive math skills. That's just not how real life works.
Right.
But we don't have a technology, I think to Jeremy's question, we don't have a technology infrastructure or an understanding of technology to rebuild those infrastructure. And I think, I used to teach database certification classes when I was a high school teacher. So I think understanding databases and how to build out databases and run them, I was like running web design with SQL server, programming, so understanding that language, I think has really been a leg up as a superintendent.
So, can you tell us about maybe some of the challenges that you faced throughout your leadership career?
I think some of the biggest ones is you're talking about uh, doing something radically different. Our education system has been relatively the same for the last 100 years.
Hmm.
And we're talking about doing something radically different than what's been being done. So I think the biggest, to just hit the nail on the head, it's helping people see a vision and really work through that vision. When I was a district administrator, I was in a much larger district than where I am now. I was over in West Valley, Yakima. I had the ability to kind of go small, and you could build that vision with these small pockets of teachers. And here in Elma, we're trying to move the whole vision for every kid in our district. So, trying to change 100 years of what education has been when our communities are thirsty for it. And even though our communities really want to see something different, when you start going down that road, it's anxiety stricken, right? It's so that there's a, I think the biggest challenge is the same challenge all of our leaders are facing is we're trying to hold hands, walk hand in hand with our communities and our teachers and our administrators on what this new vision looks like.
No.
Yeah, and you're right. It's education probably more than anything has a real struggle with any change. It wants to just hold on to even if it's very ineffective. But yeah, you just sharing that with me in that snippet when we first talked really interested me, and it really does sound like the potential to change because if you think about it, our students today, in the past, everything was go to college, go to college, go to college, or you won't be successful. And I don't think that's the case anymore. We look at more, especially Gen Z coming along, is they're more wanting to be entrepreneurial and, or have the opportunity to make a good living in certain fields or certain trades or vocations. And so offering them opportunities and like you said still giving them the potential to go to college if they desire. You're not tracking them one way or the other, you're kind of engulfing everything together, and to me that's really like a win-win situation.
It's been the challenge because we really do like to label our kids, and I think that's one of the biggest equity issues our kids face is, well, you're the shop kid or you're the college kid, and to actually say you're the all kid, right? And I think that's been the biggest change barrier we've faced in our culture of, what do you mean you can complete a registered apprenticeship and through our mastery based learning work still say you've met all your university admissions requirements? But that was a daunting moment when we were in Switzerland and we're listening to these Swiss educational economists. There was a moment where these Swiss economists stood up and they said, "We have the best engineers in the world compared to your engineers." And we're like, "Well, that's quite the statement." So I feel like I'm a hair offended. And but then they went on to explain it. They go, let's compare a Swiss engineer versus an American engineer. An American engineer is going to do 13 years of K 12, kind of liberal arts, college admissions based education. Then you're going to go to university and you're going to do 2 years of gen ed. And then that engineer at 22 years old, they're going to finish with 2 years of engineering theory. We always say, like in that Swiss system, they track, but that wasn't really the case. And it was the same thing we saw when we were in Germany. We went out to the Bauhaus University out in Thuringen, Germany. And so we got to go to the Bauhaus University where they're talking about how you get into their architectural and engineering schools. You do you at grade 10, you do 3 years of a apprenticeship, like carpentry or construction trades or framing. And then you apply to a bachelor's of applied science and you do a 4 year applied bachelor's degree in carpentry. So they have 3 years of applied experience, 4 years of applied engineering experience, 22 years old. And a German engineer is going to have 7 years of applied experience, and an American engineer at 22 years old is going to have 2 years of theoretical experience. You go, well, then why don't we do this? Well, it's because if you take a vocational pathway of courses, you're not meeting your university admissions requirements. You can't go to university. So the common rhetoric is that we track that we can't be like Europe. They track you're on a vocational, you're on a college bound versus we just teach all kids college bound. But if you take a vocational pathway within the US, you're not meeting your university admissions requirements. So we kind of have this belief that we don't track like Europe, when in reality, we track our kids way worse because we don't allow our vocational kids, our shop kids, to take university admissions requirements. That mastery based learning environment, I realize, is really that tool. And it really takes that understanding of databases and technology to build the tool to create a system in which we're not limiting our kids. And now you can still do a vocational pathway and still leave your university admissions door wide open.
Do you think part of that, maybe moving forward, is when, like yourself and maybe the millennials move, which I guess you are a millennial. I don't know.
Yeah, the only millennial superintendent in our state.
Well, that's what I'm
Wow.
saying. Yeah. And so, because I'm Gen X, so I've tried to keep up with technology, but I'm just wondering, do you think maybe the next generation will be able to see that and understand that? Because when you talk about the databases and we talk about tracking, you're here, so you're not in this track. That's all we know. So we've never thought, just you speaking that a few minutes ago, my mind's going 100 miles an hour about how much sense that actually makes, and that why can't you put those standards into other courses or classes, even if they are, an apprenticeship or something. Because like you said, I mean, and I think that's one of the poor things we have always done in education is segment things so much that we never bring it back together to make real world sense. 50 minutes of this and then we jump here, that's not realistic. But doing it that way to me makes such good sense. But I wonder if just, the older generation not being that tech savvy or understanding, maybe, hesitates to jump on board with that. And maybe it'll take the millennials or the next generation to kind of embrace that.
I don't know. I mean, I'll be really honest. I don't know if I have an answer for that because I mean, as I said, it's kind of unique because there's not too many former computer science, graphic design superintendents out there who spent their undergraduate years doing database designs and network admin and all of these different types of skill sets. So it's kind of probably a unique model.
Well, I was going
Yeah.
to ask, how is it perceived? What kind of feedback have you gotten?
There's a great example of and I'm going to apologize. I'm going to actually go look because we have a great example of out of Missouri. One of our superintendents is doing our Redefining Ready work and hosted one of our webinars. And I think eventually I want to take a trip out there where Missouri is really trying to figure out this mastery based learning work and how can you build these kind of career pathways. I find though what I see happening in the world is I feel the conversation, to your point, Brad, is pretty fragmented. I see there's a lot of superintendents that are really championing the like career pathway, post-secondary pathway work, and I see a lot of really cool things happening on like a mastery-based learning environment or a competency-based learning environment. But what you're seeing is those competency skills are still existing within like an English or a math class. I think one of the best ones I've seen is Jeff Dillon out of Wilder, Idaho, tiny little district over in the west end of Idaho. He leads the AASA Rural Schools Consortium. So he brings in tiny little districts from across the United States. And he's just got one of the most impressive competency based learning environments in this tiny little district. I think Wilder's maybe like 600 kids. But I think figuring out how to take this mastery based, this competency based environment, and then take this career pathway based environment, because they're super relevant conversations, and we need to start having these leaders come together and figuring out how to bring those two concepts together. I think is going to be an overarching barrier we'll be experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I hope you just keep spreading that. Like I said, it just, my mind just trying to wrap around it too, and it's just like it makes so much sense that it's like, you know, why can we not just jump on board with that? So, the point, like you said, that you almost be offended when they say that, but when you think about their student leaving with 7 years of hands-on experience and ours with 2 years of just theoretical learning, who is really going to be better prepared and be more effective, I guess.
100%, right? And there's just so much research. I mean, it was the CMET's experience at ETH Zurich was just quite the experience of you're just enmeshed with this, like the world's leading research on these TVET educational programs, and they have the receipts to back it up.
Yeah, that's just really intriguing to me. I definitely will be looking more of that up and researching that too.
So shifting gears a little bit, can you tell us about a an educator or two you've met throughout your journey that has impacted you the most? It could be those that have taught you, or educators you've worked alongside, or administrators.
I've had a lot of teachers that I've worked with, a lot of educators that I've worked with that have just completely and totally just blow me away and inspire me. I think my favorite is I talked about our Microsoft certification program with seventh graders, where we're Microsoft certifying every seventh grader in the district. That was our priority. And I had this educator, Davina Khan, and Davina came in the most humble interview ever on, well, I can figure out how to do that, or I can learn how to do that, and then began working with all of our students and just kind of upping the ante. It was like, let's just first start off with like PowerPoint certifying our students, getting them used to it, and then moving on to a full Python certification program. And then I want all of our students to be able to begin coding and Python coding. And what I loved about Davina is it's all about the kid and what the kid knows. And I'm going to do whatever I need to do for you to know what you need to know. And those are those teachers that when I walk in the room, my cup just gets filled, because when you walk in the room, I love a messy classroom. Like those quiet classrooms, everybody's doing the same thing, was not an environment I was ever going to be successful in. And you walked in, and I could walk into Davina's room. Every kid is doing something different, and she is walking around the room helping them on project after project. Where are you on your coding project? What do you need to get done? Where are you going on here? And if I could have a million Davinas, I would have a million Davinas. My other favorite teacher was a Tim Sorensen. Tim Sorensen, he came to me. He was teaching AutoCAD in the neighboring district, and he was a retired guy, former manufacturing shop guy, was a former CWI certified welding inspector, and a former certified welding educator. And I go, Tim, what are you doing? I'm doing AutoCAD all day. We're not teaching welding? No, you're a former machinist. So Tim, the most laid back, most humbled human being ever, and you'd walk in and he would have all the competencies and skills mapped out on his whiteboard, and the kids could just walk over there, grab whatever they need to do. They'd go to the end mill, they'd go to the lathe, they'd go to the welders. And then I just come to Tim and say, hey, you're a CWI, why don't we just certify our welding students? Let's do it. And Tim, we'll go ahead and we're having a new Boeing partnership. I'm going to send you to Boeing. Okay. Hey Tim, we are going to be launching this registered apprenticeship. So we have to go to a few Department of Labor meetings to figure out our youth labor laws so you can have our 16-year-olds. That's the other benefit of our youth apprenticeship. Our 16-year-olds are out working, running industrial equipment. And Washington State has laws that allow them to do that if we can show they've been trained in the safety of that equipment through registered apprenticeship. So, hey, Tim, I need you to go become OSHA certified. I need you to go become trained in this. I need you to go. Okay. And just the most humble human being ever. But I think the teachers that have truly inspired me are the ones that really have their eye focused on the right target, which is what do our kids need to know and what am I going to do for them to know it? And what you do doesn't matter. I just need to know it.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so funny because that resonates. We spoke with a lady, educational leader from Thailand earlier this morning, and she talked about when she's talking with like a second language, she's traveled around, so she's had to earn other languages. And she said, so when I speak to someone, my goal is not for what I say to be perfect. My goal is for them to understand what I'm saying. And that kind of resonates with what you're saying there. I need to teach what they need to know, how they will learn it. And that, that's the bottom line, is meeting them, where they're at with to meet that goal. I think that's powerful.
My daughter is a foreign exchange student in Japan right now. So she's 16 years old in
Oh, wow.
Tokyo. She's at Mita Metropolitan High Schools right at Tokyo Tower. And she says it's actually the exact same thing. And we don't do that in the United States, right? We're going to do chapter 4, answer the questions in the back, write an essay, I'm going to grade it. And they literally every 6 weeks they assess and they get their assessment scores, and then the teachers just rebuild their lessons based upon what the kids need, because at the end of the day it's all built around the skills and the grades don't matter, and she doesn't get grades. It's did she learn the skills they needed to learn by the end of the year.
Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we've talked to a couple of different educators about individualized learning and just, it's just so effective, but we don't see that a whole lot. So it's just really great to hear what you've been working on and go
Well, and
ahead.
I think, well, I was going to say, especially when you think of like apprenticeships and stuff, you really are, if it's something that they kind of have a passion about or are interested in, how can you have a better individualized plan than to do that? And, I bet you don't have to worry about absenteeism and things like that, with those students, I would imagine. And we know that's a big problem everywhere else.
Well, I think you got two topics. I want to break those apart, but I've got a funny story for you. So before I left West Valley Yakima, we built a school called the West Valley Innovation Center. And it was a school built around three apprenticeships: health sciences, manufacturing, and computer science. And then we actually replicated it. It is a European TVET school where you mastery based in all academics. So we built this mastery based school built around these TVET systems as a magnet school. And that was the impetus for coming to my new district is should this really be isolated as a magnet school? But Russ Tuman, the principal there, has just got this great story. And he's got this student who's constantly missing the bus, can't get up on time. But as a 14-year-old would take the family car and would still drive it to school because he didn't want to miss school. So they had to have conversations that as a you can't take the car to come to school. So when we built this magnet school to do it, you're not wrong. These kids are so excited and they're getting a paycheck and they have this intrinsic motivation and value. But I want to dissect the other topic you made. I think it's a worth conversation because we're on this push on a lot of these mastery based, competency based learning conversations about student autonomy and agency. And I think we're at a nexus point on where we really need to get better at defining that, because a lot of schools are doing this competency based learning and they're saying do whatever you want to learn it. Go build a skate park, go figure out how to build a trebuchet in your backyard, and we'll do. And we're of the belief that autonomy based education means students can do anything. And I don't know if I subscribe to that as much as I feel like most students want to know that we're doing something to make them have better lives. And they would appreciate us to define the pathway to have a better life. Like, here's these English skills. Part of what enabled my daughter to do English 101, or sorry, go to Japan, is she's completed English 101 and English 102 and has all of her college English credits done through, we have an Arizona State University partnership where starting in ninth grade, you can start knocking out all of your university credits. Well, she was on track to graduate at 17 with her associate's degree. She has all college English done. She doesn't need another college English class. As a 15-year-old, she didn't. So it was like, well, what do you do? And I found that as students start seeing, like, hey, I want to pursue a post-secondary education, I want to pursue an apprenticeship, students like having those community-based relationships to define the pathway. So students wanting autonomy and agency doesn't mean they want to just do anything.
Right.
Students wanting autonomy and agency means they want to know their education is going to have value further in their lives.
Oh, you're so right with that. I couldn't agree more. Because I was thinking back, and when people kind of share that, you know, that should just be all their, you know, their choice, their autonomy or whatever, you know, I was thinking back when I was a middle schooler, all I would have wanted to do was probably play video games and say that that was my pathway or whatever. So we do, you know, have to, like you said, make sure that it's preparing them for something in the future. But yeah, but do you see that with the apprenticeships that the absentee is down? I mean, because they probably enjoy going and doing.
Well, way down, right? Because the students don't want to miss out on it. They're so excited. That's why I love that story from Russ. Now, I want to add this though. When we launched the registered apprenticeship program, this is another one of my favorite stories. So we first launched it in 2016 when I was over in West Valley, Yakima. So we had our first cohort of registered apprenticeships. I think we're probably in like that fall of 20 or in about 2017 time. So we've been running this registered apprenticeship journey level cert through a magnet program for quite a while. And when kids go to work, when you have a job, you go to work and you do your job, right? You know what the job expects of you. You know how to do your job. You know what your boss wants to see. Well, these students started getting really good at that. They started looking at the way we designed our apprenticeship is they would do it the first 3 periods of the day, and they would still need to come to school for the last 3 periods of the day to finish like academic classes. Like, I need to get a social studies credit, or I need to do this. So they come back and still have those built within a Carnegie unit. Early phases. We're getting better now about integrating all of it, but at that time. But then they would find out, like, the teacher would be like, hey, Thursdays is going to be like study day where I'm going to get you prepped for the test. Or this is going to be a work day. You know, those traditional things you have in classes. Well, they would just not come to school and they would just work 4 more hours at work and get more time done on their apprenticeship and get paid more. And so I remember the high school, I was the CTE director at the time, and the high school principal came to me. He's like, you got to talk to your kids. Like, they're not coming to school. They're starting to get chronically absent. I'm like, okay, well, what did they miss? Well, they missed the study hall day. Okay. For what? To get paid. Was it being graded? Are they behind in their assignments? No. Are they missing points? No. What are the grades in class? Well, they're all pulling B's or A's, but we might have to take some participation points away. None of this is making any sense. Like, I just want to be clear. So what you're saying is they're missing, they've realized they can stay at work and miss school because nothing's going on at school right now because it's the work catch-up day, but we're going to take away participation points just to make sure they're there. Yes.
And isn't that like the old mindset, you know?
Sorry. So that was my, so Brad, you asked the question, did attendance improve? Well, I don't know. Some areas it got worse because the students got really good at figuring out what was important, you know, what do I need to do and what do I not need to do, which I feel like is a skill we want them to have.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah. I mean, don't we do that as adults?
Don't we want our adults to be able to do that?
Absolutely. No, I love that.
So,
It's just such a great concept. And like I said, and I think, you know, it really does address some of the issues that we have, you know, with students being engaged, with absentee or whatever, with, you know, we always talk about motivation. Well, if you're doing something you enjoy and you're getting paid for it, you know, that's motivation. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't matter whether we determine if it's internal or external or whatever. It's, you know, always usually a mix of both, but, you know, we're taking care of those problems instead of trying to, you know, figure out a different way. So, yeah, I'm sure the kids really, you know, I would have appreciated back then to have, you know, something like that where, you know, you're leaving high school, but much better prepared for college or a career or, whatever. I think, it seems like we allow, times are so different, and it seems like we prepare kids to leave high school and they're not really prepared for much of anything, in life,
Mm.
so.
We have a comment in education, right? Where they always talk about, like, well, we don't want the kid to decide now. We don't want to put. We got to make sure that they're like kind of broadly prepared. But I feel like what we're not understanding is, I mean, prepare. Like if you're not preparing them for something, you're not really preparing them for anything. And we really forget that. And students really kind of want to know where this is going to go. And you don't have to stay there. I went to two high schools. I went to North Beach High School over in Ocean Shores, Washington, on the coast. And at the end of my sophomore year of high school, my mom moved to a town called Washougal, Washington, down along the Oregon-Washington border. One high school had a 7-period day, and the other high school had a 6-period day. So when I moved down to Washougal, I had way too many high school credits. So my senior year of high school, I got a job working for a company called Saint Gobain. They were famous for installing the mirrors in the Palace of Versailles, and we grew sapphire boules and turned them into wafers for like high-end computer chips. Where I learned in this job that a sapphire is like number 9 on Mohs hardness scale. But it has the same conductivity of a silicone. So you can use sapphire in the same way you can use silicone in building computer chips, but it costs more, but it's much stronger. So you can build industrial computer chips on sapphire. So that's what we built. We built these in the same way you would build silicone. So I'd leave school at lunch because we were on a block schedule, 4 periods a day. And then I would go work at Saint Gobain, and I worked in inventory production and control, where I did data input and data tracking. And they used me because I could type really fast. Because Brad, I resonated with me when you said you would have played computer games all day. I was a computer,
Mhm.
so I could type really, really fast. So they had, especially on 10 key, because that's really close to when you're controlling your whatever game you're playing. I think mine was Heretic and Hexen of the 1993 through 1998 was my game of choice. But um, I worked in inventory production and control and doing data analytics. And then when I went to college, I was going to do an IT computer science degree. And then I realized I was far too gregarious to actually go to work in a technical field like that, so I ended up deciding to become a computer teacher. So I got my teaching cert on top of that. But as I moved into administration, I realized like student achievement, growth, data. When I spent my job working in data and looking at lost sapphire product, because that was my job in inventory production and control, was identifying lost sapphire production product in the various different departments through the phase of the construction of these sapphire chips and these sapphire wafers. And then it really resonated with me as an administrator as I'm looking at unit by unit loss of student learning and assessment areas. So it was such a transferable school skill into educational administration. So we always think like let's not have our students prepare for this job in sapphire production, wafer production, because that's where they're locked in at. And yet I think I got like this very unique data management tool skill set from industry that has really benefited me as an educational administrator.
Yeah, yeah. We've talked to a couple different people that have had just very different backgrounds before they went into education, and I mean I feel like that is just made for some of the best leaders, and the things that we've seen implemented based on different backgrounds. It's amazing. I'm very excited for the future of education, especially in the States, hearing all the different viewpoints. So I do want to ask, you obviously have a lot going on, and I'm sure that, put a lot of time and effort into what you do. How do you take care of yourself? What are your hobbies? How do you kick back and relax?
So I'm a little casual right now. In fact, I actually got a pair of riding pants on. When I hang up here, my wife and I our bikes are all loaded. We're on our way. We're going to take she and I each have our own KTM. So we have 2 KTM Super Adventures. And then we're on our way to the Canadian Rockies. So we got to get out to Spokane. So
Wow.
that's about 6 hours away. So we're going to meet a group in Spokane tomorrow morning. And then we're going to go up through in Radium, just on the west side, outside of Banff, and then we'll kind of work our way up through the Canadian Rockies around the Kamloops by Sunday. Hopefully, to be back
Wow.
here by Monday. So,
Yeah.
so my wife
That's
and I each have our own bike.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
that's
That
so
sounds like quite a
awesome.
ride. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Banff, that's where the castle is, right?
Yeah, they have
Yeah.
a quite the hotel, up there. That's pretty fancy. Well, they have the Castle Mountains too, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I know
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I think it's a hotel now that was. I think it was a castle that Queen Elizabeth, I think, stayed there as a child or something. So, I've spoken up there a couple of times in Alberta, so I know the area you're talking about, and it's beautiful.
Well, yeah.
So,
I don't know if people in Washington know how close we are to it. Like I'm on the Washington coast, so it's going to take me about 6 hours to get to Spokane today, and then we'll come back around. I mean, so I have that. That's one of my areas, motorcycle riding. My youngest daughter, actually, the parts just started coming in. We've committed to building a computer. So the computer nerd in me
Nice.
just lit up because she was like, I need a computer IR VR system. And then my wife got mad because she's like, great, you're going to pull out the credit card. I just know you're going to spend money you shouldn't be spending because your daughter just told you she wants to build a computer. So, so we do that. So, and then I coach a women's rugby team. So I'm way into rugby. So I had practice
Oh,
last night
oh,
with our women. So my wife
oh,
does
that's
jujitsu.
very interesting.
Yeah. So
oh.
yeah, so rugby is like a big jam. I got some trophies when I was a high school teacher. We used to coach high school girls rugby. So absolutely
Really?
love rugby.
Okay.
Huh.
So
That's
My
interesting.
I don't even
yeah.
think we have rugby in the South here. Like I'm trying to think, but so that is interesting.
Huh.
Oh, so,
Yeah.
so anyway, so Grays Harbor County, in Washington State is the home to the lawsuit called Darren versus Gould. And what it means is these two girls turned out in this tiny little town of Wichita, Washington. These two girls turned out for high school football, and the state said girls aren't allowed to play football, and the girls sued. And as a result, girls get to play football. And then in Washington, they added volleyball. But there's a lingering thing in that lawsuit that says girls get a field based contact tackle sport when they want it. So I'm always like beating
Mm.
this, like lacrosse, different rules for boys and girls. And I think there's this new flag football's been pushing up. But what I love about girls rugby is there's no rule difference. Rules are the same for rugby for boys or girls, same ball size, everything. And then the girls get to go out there and play a full contact, full tackle sport. So love it.
Oh, that is cool. I like that. Yeah. That's a good way to kind of, yeah, relax and rejuvenate and keep your, like, take your mind away from all your
I don't know.
responsibilities.
I think take my mind off. I don't know if like my wife Casey and I don't think either one of us relax by relaxing. Like I said, it's either motorcycle riding through a really high detailed hairpin turns, out there coaching a high contact sport, or trying to do some sort of video game now with my youngest daughter as we're trying to. That's obviously going to keep you engaged. I mean, my wife and I get the time to coach rugby because my two daughters, my oldest daughter in Japan now is training in wrestling and in jujitsu, and my youngest daughter.
Oh,
So the three of them all do jujitsu together.
Oh, very
oh,
cool.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, that's awesome. Wow.
So
Well, all right. Our final question, and it's the tough one, but it's so being lattes and leaders, what is your hot beverage of choice? Is it coffee, latte, cappuccino, tea, none of the above? What's your go to?
it is black coffee all day.
All day.
So way more than I should, but um, I don't think I could handle all the sugar or the milk in it because of how often I drink it.
Drink
So
it.
it
Yeah.
is black, regular, plain, old drip black coffee, but there's going to be about 6 or 7 of those cups in a day.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So that really is your fuel, right? To keep you going.
I mean, I think my wife has got me on decaf because at the end of the day, I just like the black coffee.
Yeah. Wow.
Can you tell a difference? Do you like it or as long as it's
I can
coffee?
just doesn't, it just doesn't hit the same. So, but I think she's right. She's like, I don't know if your blood pressure can manage this much coffee.
Yeah.
She's always looking out for me.
Hear that.
I hear you. Well,
So,
I appreciate you coming on. Like I said, I was just very interested in that. Now I'm even more interested, and I think listeners will be very interested too. Man, what just an innovative thing that you're presenting and sharing around the country, and I hope it's something that I think it can be very impactful and very relevant and helpful to our students. to give
Well,
them an opportunity to be prepared and to make a good living.
I sent you the link, but I mean, we're actually hosting Redefining Ready in April of 2000. So we're going to have superintendents from
Oh, wow.
across the United States and school district leaders from across the United States are welcome to come join us. So in April of this year, but anybody looking to join Redefining Ready and kind of figure out ways in which we can rethink our education system, you got the link. It would be great if you can go ahead and share it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
definitely we will. Yeah. When we post this, we will, because I'm right there with you. I'm full support of that. So I'll definitely encourage them to do that. So yeah. So we won't keep you. I think Jeremy had just asked about one more nugget or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you had to leave educators with just one nugget of wisdom, with just one thing, what would it be?
I think it's time to be bold
Mm,
because we're 100 years and change. And I think with a lot of this turmoil we faced in education, right, over the last few years, having the pandemic, there's a lot of fear reigning in the superintendency and the school leadership role, where it's like, if I change too much, am I going to lose my role? But I think the key to staying in our positions and leading our positions is really understanding that our communities want better for our kids. And I think you're just going to have to be bold in your leadership and just take the risks that we know we need to take so you can do the best things for kids. So be bold.
I love that. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think sometimes when they get to that level, like you said, that's kind of a fear, starts to come in. But yeah, that's when you really need to be your boldest. So that's a good last word. Well, thank you for being here today. Enjoyed having you on. Love your stories and what you're doing out there. So definitely keep up the good work.
Brad, Jeremy, thanks for having me.
This has been Lattes and Leaders with Dr. Brad Johnson. We hope that you leave today feeling informed and inspired. For more educational content, be sure to add this podcast to your list and follow Dr. Johnson on any and all social media platforms. For more information on Dr. Johnson, Jeremy Johnson, and special guest, check out drbradjohnson.com. That is DOCTOR, bradjohnson.com. Hope to have you back soon.